Hello everyone and welcome back for another Kitbash adventure. Let's take a look. The Sicarians are the assassins of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Originally designed to hunt down rogue servitors and other such ilk, they proved so successful that they were later inducted into the Mechanicus military and are now seen across the galaxy. The Ruststalkers stride across the battlefield, bringing swift death to their enemies with their transonic weapons that attune themselves to the exact molecular frequency of their victim's armor, slicing clean through them like a hot knife through butter. The Infiltrators, their dome-headed cousins, emit static and noise on a number of frequencies, distracting and crippling their enemies before going in for the kill with their taser goads or power swords. While members of the Cult Mechanicus are revered as holy warriors of the Omnissiah, the Sicarians, as members of the Scutari legions, are seen as entirely expendable pieces of war gear. They themselves are constructed from injured Scutari troops, their crushed or severed limbs replaced with long striding legs and razor-sharp blades. For these units, I wanted to take the same base kit and run in two entirely different directions with it. The Infiltrators would represent roving bands of Sicarians who lived on the edges of Dark Mechanicus society, and the Ruststalkers would represent Mechanicus-bound demon spirits. To do so, I decided to combine the Cawdor gang from Necromunda, which has some amazing down-to-earth ragged clothing, super cool cowls, and an appropriately dark aesthetic. I knew I wanted to combine the cowls or torsos of these models with the long mechanical limbs of the original Sicarian kit, but wasn't quite sure at first. I began by prepping a cowl, brought over a Sicarian torso, and began to dry fit them to see what could work. It became immediately clear that I wouldn't be able to simply attach the cowl to the torso, as it just wouldn't fit inside of the actual cowl itself. So I chopped off the top of the Sicarian torso and glued it directly onto the cowl to be able to gap fill with green stuff later on. After attaching the legs and arms with a little green stuff work, I had my first Infiltrator, but I wasn't entirely pleased with the aesthetic. I wanted to play up the long-legged nature of these Sicarians with these big, stilt-like metal legs, which the original poses actually don't really highlight, as they're all hunched over like runners at the start of a track race. With that in mind, I took a different approach for the rest of them. Rather than fitting the Sicarian torso to a Cawdor cowl, I used the entirety of the Cawdor body and worked from there. I was a little worried about a couple models with their beer bellies, but in the end it worked fine and actually really comes off as robots wrapped in layers and layers of rags and robes. Cutting off the legs just above the knee, I was then able to transpose the metal legs onto each torso pretty seamlessly. Where possible, I kept the pistons at the top and patched them with a little bit of green stuff or even just glue. This was much more in line with what I was thinking. I could then also use a much more fluid combination of the Cawdor arms or Sicarian arms as was appropriate for each individual model. The heads themselves required a little tweaking again, as they had also been designed to be attached at a harsh angle, looking up from the torso that was in a near crouch. Snipping off any extra bits, I glued the head directly to the back of the cowl for the most part, save for one model where I tried affixing it with green stuff to see what effect I could get. Both methods work, with the pure glue method feeling a bit more like the head is floating, but also granting some more depth to the cowl, which is nice. Overall, once I had worked out the formula on the second Sicarian, doing the rest became a simple and fun process, making slight adjustments to each model's individual needs and really building up the character on each of them. The Ruststalkers are the more sinister of the two Sicarians, and I knew right from the start what I wanted to do with them. In fact, you've already seen some of the end products for these back in the very first Dark Mechanicus video. This simple part swap was one of the first inspirations for the army's aesthetic, and involved combining the Ruststalker parts with that of the Bladegeist Revenants from Age of Sigmar. When creating completely custom versions of well-known units, I find it important to keep them all easily recognizable so as to not confuse your opponent when you play them. The goal, after all, is to create a sweet custom army, not to model for advantage by bamboozling them. A great way to keep a kit bash recognizable is to look at what are the essential elements of the model. For the Ruststalkers, it's two things: their iconic gas mask faceplates and their transonic weaponry. This is what drew me to the Geistblade Revenants, as the only non-ghostly elements of these models are the faceplates and their swords. In fact, these are the only things distinguishing them from other similar units, such as their scythe-bearing brethren. It was then simple to transplant the faceplates from the Ruststalkers onto the body of the Revenants, and in turn to snip off the sword arms and replace them with the transonic weapons of the Ruststalkers. A little green stuff and glue to smooth out the connection points, and voila, we're done. A super simple yet effective conversion that gets us drastically different results than the Cawdor kit. Whereas I wanted the Infiltrators to feel like robots who had gained sentience and been forced to live on the edge of society for a long time, I wanted the Ruststalkers to feel like warp-cursed demons bound to the technology of the Dark Mechanicus. I had a ton of fun working on these two units, and for me, they were a great study in kit bashing and converting. They let me stretch my creative skills, working on how to create vastly different personalities and aesthetics with the same kit, and also how to maintain the integrity and clarity on a model on a vastly different torso. Thank you so much as always for joining me on another Kitbash adventure. I hope this video was useful, and as always, let us know what you thought in the comments below. If you're so inclined, please like and subscribe, as it does allow us to continue to build out regular content for y'all. That's it for me. I'll catch y'all next time on the tabletop.